treat the degree as you would any other purchase. And I know people don't like to hear the fact that, students are like customers. Students aren't like customers. If you're sliding $10,000 or $20,000 across the table for a semester, which is not uncommon at all. I mean, at some of the major privates, it can be $80,000 or $90,000 for a year, easily. When you're sliding that much money back and forth across the table, you're buying something.
Ready to roll?
Yep.
All right.
Real Texan.
Why should this matter to real Texans? Thanks for joining this conversation with Real Texans, where we talk to folks who are trying to make life better in the Lone Star State. Today, I'm not in my normal studio in Leander. Instead, I'm on the campus of West Texas A&M University, where when we talk about Real Texans, we sometimes have to talk to, and forgive me, but these are your words I'm using here, Dr. Wendler. You have to talk to a damn Yankee who has become a born-again Texan. So I want to talk about that. But sitting here with Dr. Walter Wendler, the president of West Texas A&M University. Dr. Wendler, thank you so much for letting me intrude on your office today.
Well, Michael, it's my pleasure. I'm pleased to have you up here in Canyon, Texas, in West Texas. And it's a nice day. It's a mild breeze and a little bit cool. And that's an understatement on both counts. It's nearly a hurricane up here, and it's very cold.
Yeah, that's part of it. But in an hour and a half, it'll be back to being nice and warm. And
that's exactly right. That's it.
So, Dr. Wendler, you, a lot of folks got to know you because you're not shy about speaking your mind. I want to talk about that a little bit. I'm very intrigued. Before we start, I told you this, that looking at your bio does not scream, this guy should be the president of West Texas A&M. I want to make sure I get this right. This is the damn Yankee part. Raised in New York?
Long Island, 45 miles out on the North Shore.
And you spent 2 years at State University, got your associate's degree.
Yes, sir.
Then you bounce down to Texas A&M, get your bachelor's degree, you get a master's degree at UC Berkeley, a PhD at University of Texas.
Yeah.
And yet people talk about the way you're described as this rabble-rousing, Christian conservative who they don't know how they let this guy in academia. That is not the bio of either the West Texas A&M president or the rabble-rouser that some people want to claim you are. How did all these things come together, Dr. Wendler?
It's mostly, Michael, putting one foot in front of the other. For example, how did I get from a community college out on Long Island to Texas A&M? Well, I applied to a few universities, and this was in 1970. Applied to a few universities, and I'll tell you what they were. It was the State University of New York, where I would have to study architecture, where I would have paid in-state tuition, the University of Cincinnati, and Texas A&M University. And what happened was Texas A&M took the most hours in transfer. I had 72 hours of credit at the community college, and they took 70 and applied almost all of them to the degree. There were 2 hours that didn't count, and that was phys ed. You had to take phys ed at A&M, but you didn't get credit for it. I had to take it, and I got credit for it, but they couldn't use it at A&M because you didn't get credit. And I was talking to my dad, and I said, Dad, I don't know where I should go. And he said, this Texas A&M looks pretty good. And I said, why is that? You've never been to Texas State. His family and my mother's family came through Ellis Island, settled in Brooklyn, then moved out further out on Long Island. And he said, well, it's the furthest away. I said, I didn't know how to take it, but it was sound advice. He had never been anywhere. He had never been west of New Jersey. As a matter of fact, I thought New Jersey was the Wild West until I got to College Station, and then I realized, no, this is the Wild West. Okay. This is the Wild West. But that's how I ended up at A&M. It was just putting one foot in front of the other, making a calculated decision, looking at costs. I'm a first-generation student, 6 children in our family. My dad was a janitor in the high school I attended. My mom was a cook in the kitchen in the high school I attended. And when they had 6 kids, and we all went to community college. And it worked very well for us. And I am not at all shy about recommending that for students who are concerned about costs.
we've kind of reached a point over, calling it maybe the last 50 years, where folks start saying, if you don't go to college, if you don't have a 4-year degree post high school, then you're kind of a little lesser of a person. It seems to be there's this kind of attitude that comes out, this sense that you have to go, everyone must go to college. And it's kind of translated into a lot of folks becoming very disillusioned now with higher education.
Yeah.
How do you balance it? Now, on the one hand, you say, well, not everyone has to go to college, which sounds very elitist, right? But on the other hand, college is not suitable for all professions, is it?
No, it's not, and it's a good point. I visited a few high schools, 132, and I talked to 20,000 students in those high schools. I visited half of them twice, so I spent a lot of time on the road, and I talked to students in assemblies. I didn't go to the cafeteria and sit at a table and, with a little WT sign on the table and say, consider WT. And what I talked to those kids about was establishing a plan a plan for them. And I would start by saying, you could go in the military. It's a great way to start a life of engaged citizenship. Go in the military, go to vocational school, go into a family business, start your own business, go to community college or go to university. There's a lot of options. And what you have to do, what I encourage each of these students to do, is figure out what would work for them. What made the most sense for them. And college doesn't make sense for everybody. And that's not elitist. It's a statement of fact. Mm-hmm. And, you can take these very rare examples, the 1/10 of 1/10 of 1% and talk about, IT geniuses and so on that didn't go to college, but that's silly. There's just a lot of folks who get good jobs and contribute to their community. For me, the whole purpose of a university education is to become an engaged citizen. Engaged citizenship. The fact of the matter is, I believe college is one facet of creating a stronger Republican form of government. That's the way it works. And it doesn't have to be college. I mean, there were a lot of folks 200 years ago didn't go to college, but they studied on their own. They were autodidacts. They studied, they learned, they became proficient in understanding how the world works. This is especially true of Enlightenment thinkers, the founders of our nation. They had their faults, but they also had tremendous vision and insight. And the proof of the pudding is we're sitting here today in a free society. And I think college can help that, but I think sometimes it's overstated. My dad and my father-in-law, then my girlfriend's dad, told me about going to graduate school after Texas A&M. They said, just go. It's worth it, no matter what you get. Well, in 1972, that was true. Mm-hmm. When I went to A&M in 1970, if I remember correctly, and I think I do, the out-of-state tuition, $200 a semester, all the hours you could take. Nobody counted credit hours. Too much work, so it was $200 for all the hours you could take. And you'll remember this being a good Aggie. There was a $12.50 technology fee to pay for an IBM 360 on the second floor of Cushing Memorial Library on the campus. That was the technology fee. $12.50 was all I paid. Yeah. And it took care of everything. So my father and that soon-to-be father-in-law, or after that to be father-in-law, were right. It was worth it. At that price, it was worth it. I didn't have to say to myself, how much money am I going to have to borrow? I didn't borrow any money. I left community college with more money in the bank than I had when I started. And when I went to A&M, I could pay for my education and room and board and everything else, kind of as I went. And I did it. And it's almost impossible for that to happen now. And there's a lot of scholarships, a lot of students go to college debt-free. But this was all this sort of, Michael, putting one foot in front of the other. I had a long-range plan, and I tell these students that I used to talk with, I still go out, but not as much. It was a major effort for a couple of years, and it was a great way to begin to know West Texas. I got to meet real people, real teachers, real superintendents. I met with school boards, city council members. We got county judges come to meetings because we put the word out that I was going to come and talk about West Texas A&M. I had so many people in school say, we have never had a university president visit our campus. And I said, that's a damn shame. I mean, I don't know why. I mean, that is the future of the nation, are these young juniors and seniors. I'll never forget, I went to, I have to be careful. I got so many stories from from the road. I could write a book on it. But I went to Kelton High School, and I pulled up into the parking lot. And somebody I didn't know came out. Turned out it was the principal, but he came out and he said, "Are you Dr. Wendler?" I said, "Yes, sir." I said, "How'd you know that?" And he said, "Well, two things." He said, "I've never seen your car before, and you got a suit on." So that was, and he said to me, Michael, and this is what he said. He said, "I'm very proud to tell you that 50% of our graduating class went to West Texas A&M last year." And I did exactly what you did. I kind of furrowed my brow and said, "Man, that's amazing." He said, "Yeah, both of them." And I said, "I hope we got the valedictorian in the salutatorian." And he said, "You did." So it just, those are those small communities. And I'm going to tell you, those communities are pressure cookers for a free society. In many communities, that's the last public thing that's left. Even in so many communities, there's no churches left. There's no other public gathering place. It's the school. In Lasbury, I stood out in front of the auditorium and talking with the principal and one of the teachers and a few of the students. There wasn't that many there. We stood there and we talked, and I looked down the street and I saw what appeared to be an old church. Sure enough, I asked the principal, I said, "Is that a church down there?" She said, "Yeah, it's an old Methodist church," but he said, "It's not a church any longer." He said, we have it now. They gave it to us because the congregation disappeared." He said, "We use it for storage." In Lasbury, that school, and it was pre-K through high school, that school was it. It was the public in the community. And I think that is entirely important to the future of our country. And I think universities have a role to play in creating that public.
Yeah. So when we think of, I want to go back to your bio here in a second.
Oh, sorry.
No. But this is great because, you talk about how, in 1970, you were paying $212.50 all in for tuition. Today, a lot of folks, they're the first rung of concern about sending their child to college, young man and woman coming out of high school thinking about college. The first concern is, can I pay this? It's thousands of dollars. See the horror stories of hundreds of thousands of dollars that people take on debt. Certainly very unique kind of institution situations, but lots of debt. How does West Texas A&M, how do you as an individual, how do you help manage that expectation of debt and what we're going to get out of it?
That's a great question, Michael, and I talk about it a lot, ad nauseum, actually, for some people. I encourage people to go to community college, and I say, I'm a prisoner of my experience, and I admit it. I know I am, and I say, look, if you're not sure if you have the resources, start at the community college, see how the fit is, see if it makes sense or not. If you need to. Now, if you have somebody writing checks for you, or a family foundation or an individual, or if you have a scholarship, these questions are moot, but they're not for the average person. They have to ask, can I afford this? Can I swing it? And I tell them to look very carefully. On our website, we have from the Census Bureau, or the National Bureau of Labor Standards, actually, we have the average starting salaries in various occupations, so a student can ask themselves, if I'm going to be a school teacher in Borger, Texas, maybe teach elementary school and start at $40,000 a year, how much can I legitimately expect to pay back when I borrow? And we have to be honest with students about that. And a lot of times we put our hands in the air and we say, well, that's not our issue. That's the family issue and all that.
How can you put a price on higher ed?
Exactly. Well, we get that. Well, it's real easy. Look at the bill you get at the end of the semester. I mean, and we're, by the way, WT is very cost effective. It's in the lowest quartile of costs in the state of Texas. And I think that's part of it, by trying to keep costs down. And our leadership, actually this leadership of the state, has said, look, we're going to keep these costs down. You guys can't just keep raising fees and tuition and so on. And it's a struggle for us. I mean, we struggle with it. But the bottom line is, I generally agree with it. We have to make sure that we are to the bone on these issues, and there's no sort of fluff in it. And for years, it was okay. I mean, people built things on campuses that were not necessary and didn't contribute to the academic mission and so on. I think it's very important. And I like the pragmatism of West Texas, and I like the pragmatic leadership we get from our board, from the chancellor, from the board that says, look, count the costs. Know what you're doing with the funds. Make sure that it has some benefit to the student. I just talked to student government last night for an hour about athletics fees and their concerns about them and so on and so forth. I said, look, they're all legitimate questions. You have to look at these things. And if we ask your opinion, do you think it's a good idea? You have to be honest with us. Don't just say, yeah, it's okay. Somebody's going to pay the bill, or I'm borrowing money and so on and so forth. But I think that what's changed is as the costs of college attendance have gone up, people have become much more careful and circumspect about how to spend money on a college education. And Michael, it's the right thing to do. And part of the problem, and I was this way myself, but part of the problem is university leadership. And I think we do a good job generally, but they need to be mindful of that and talk with students about it. Don't say, well, that's not our business. And I was at, I won't tell you where it was. Somebody could figure out who I was that I was talking to, but I was at a large high school. There were 1,000 kids, juniors and seniors, in the audience that day. And I gave them this pitch about paying attention to costs and all that sort of stuff. And benefits. What kind of a degree? A degree in computer science is different than a degree in English and economics. That's what you told me before we got on.
Close to the
yeah, I'm sorry. But that's the fact of the matter is. And it doesn't mean it's not a good idea to study English and economics. It just means you have to know what the cost is and what your perceived benefit can be from that, and the actual fiscal benefit, the financial benefit. Well, I was down there, so I talked to these kids, and I really reinforced this idea of being cost conscious and treat the degree as you would any other purchase. And I know people don't like to hear the fact that students are like customers. Students are like customers. If you're sliding $10,000 or $20,000 across the table for a semester, which is not uncommon at all. I mean, at some of the major privates, it can be $80,000 or $90,000 for a year easily. When you're sliding that much money back and forth across the table, you're buying something. And we have to be very knowledgeable about that. And I encourage the students to be. So anyway, the assistant principal of this school comes up and afterwards said, my wife told me last night, she didn't know you were going to be here. She had no idea what you were going to talk about. But she told me that she had 2 physicians, a pediatrician and a family care doc, that came in to get pre-qualified for a loan. $600,000 in medical school debt. We couldn't write them a loan. So the very thing that they thought would provide them this sort of guaranteed lift, and in fact, and that's a very rare case, I'm going to tell you, but professional school, the debt can get up pretty high. And the assumption is that the ROI is going to be pretty good on that. This business of people with baccalaureate degrees and $100,000 indebtedness, it's very, very small. It's a misconception. The average is, nationwide is less than 30. I'm very proud here. When I got here, the average indebtedness for baccalaureate degree recipients, and this includes people that didn't borrow. And a pretty good chunk of ours don't, about 40%. Some institutions go much higher than 40%, but ours about 40%. The average indebtedness was $28,000, which is, that's a Mustang, is what it is. Yeah, it's a car. We've whittled that down now to slightly over $20,000. So that's a 25% decrease in 9 years. And if we can continue to do that while the cost of everything else is going up, I will say we're nearly miracle workers in some ways. I mean, we really are whittling this thing down.
So the other thing that we hear folks talk about when they talk about, should I send my child who's graduating high school, get them teed up to go to some college, university, or the individual, do I want to do this? Is the concern around indoctrination. They're going to go into this institution, and hear a bunch of some crazy things are going to mess up their values, their principles. And again, that's why I laugh and say, when I look at kind of this path you followed, A&M, that's great. go to Berkeley? You went to UT.
I was on the curbs on both sides of the road on that one. I went, I mean, that's just the way it worked.
And so how do you dress? I mean, you've certainly not been shy.
No,
as a
some would say to a fault, and that's fine. I mean, it's who I am.
Outspoken Christian, as an outspoken believer, and I like you. I think I've read you talk about West Texas common sense values.
Yes.
I think I've heard you describe your approach in kind of the political and social realm. So, how should parents, how should prospective students, how should they approach that?
Right. It's a good question. And what I tell parents and students all the time, I always tell them, do not check your values at the campus gate. Bring them onto the campus and let your value system do what your value system does, which is inform the way you think. You cannot, it is impossible to separate who I am. And as a believer, as an unbeliever, whatever, I cannot separate that sort of heart thing from the head thing, from the intellectual life that I lead. And don't check them at the gate. Bring them onto the campus and let them inform. And when somebody challenges that, don't back down. I mean, you don't have to have a shouting match or anything. But just say, well, my worldview is a little different than yours. I believe X or Y or Z. And I think it's perfectly fine to do that. As a matter of fact, for me, it's not an option. As a leader, I have to be honest about what my value system are. I can't hide it. I can't armpit it because it's not who I am. And leaders need to be who they are, is my consensus.
Folks understand where you're coming from.
Exactly. And they can challenge me on it.
Right.
You just said things about being conservative Christian, that kind of thing, practically minded, common sense. If I take action that doesn't appear to be that way, I would expect to be challenged on it. Mm-hmm. But if I never say what I think or who I am, and I expect people to be honest with me. I mean, I have a lot of fairly direct conversations in the office here with people. And I don't think people necessarily leave with a bad feeling. I think, well, he told me what he thought. He listened to what I thought. And we may agree to disagree about something. And that's fine, I think. So I tell people, do not check your values at the campus gate. I use that line all the time. Bring them onto the campus. We can't be value free. I mean, I wouldn't want to be if we could be. It's the juice.
Yeah.
It's what makes the world work.
It feels like culturally we have devalued the idea of disagreeing agreeably. That everything has to be a shouting match to the death rather than it's okay to disagree about things. Even it's okay to even disagree about very fundamental things.
Right.
It's okay to have that disagreement. And it seems like a university should be the place where that life principle is celebrated, right?
I think so. I think it's very important. I think it's part of what people expect. It might be a little different, and I want to be careful when I say this, than a vocational school or a trade school where everything you teach is like a skill that can be applied to produce income, typically. University is a little different because it, in fact, does try to answer the question, how then should we live? I mean, we do that. Yeah. And we can't steer away from it. And I think part of the challenge is that sometimes when people come on the campus, they assume that we have some answer here. Mm-hmm. If I had that answer, if I could answer the question, how then should we live? The line out the door would be all the way to Dallas, for goodness sakes. If I could honestly answer, I don't know the answer to that question. But I don't have to. I know it for me. You need to know it for you, is what I try to encourage students to do. And think it through. And be open to listen to people that you disagree with. That's part of the challenge. We tend to shun disagreements, differing points of view, and so on. I say let them work into the mix, and that's part of what the educational process is all about.
I think for many people, you came into you certainly stepped very boldly into the cultural conversation 2023-ish, as President of Texan A&M saying, if folks want to do drag shows, that's fine. If, people's lives, that's fine. But on campus, we're not going to be doing that. Got some criticism for it. But just recently, the Board of Regents of the Texas A&M system has now taken that sort of approach and applied it to all of the universities. Do you feel maybe a little vindicated in your position, or?
Well, I'm actually waiting for the Fifth Circuit to make their ruling, and I won't say much about this because I published a letter that I sent to the faculty, and it's pretty clear. My concern was that at a university, no group of any kind should be diminished by any other group or groups of people. It's inappropriate. It's what grieves me about the anti-Semitism that we see in some of the. It's wrong. It is not the way things should be, and it creates, I think, personally, and this one I have to be careful. I don't want to say too much about it, but I think it creates a hostile work environment. It's that was the business about the drag shows, and I said it. I think drag accentuates various aspects of womanhood. And I'm almost quoting. Yes, it does, and that was my feeling. As a matter of fact, I got a few emails, about 5,000 emails about this, and the the majority of them were positive. I got one from a woman that said, "I'm going to nominate you as a honorary feminist." And I thought, it's interesting how the tide turns on these things. But at some level, I mean, I want to create a place here that doesn't value the group you belong to necessarily, or outward or inward characteristics, but rather values you for the ideas that you have and the things that you do, not for some membership in a particular social group, whether it's a natural grouping or an ideological group that you join. I don't care. That group. As I told somebody recently, there's one person's name on a diploma. It's not a group. It's an individual. And that's our job, is to help individuals basically change themselves. I mean, that's what, when I went to Texas A&M as an undergraduate, I basically said to the university, I never said this, but in hindsight, this is what I said. I said, here's my problem. I don't know how to think like an architect, and I'm willing to pay you $212.50 a semester to help me learn how to do that. That's a simple-minded view of it, but it works in West Texas because people here seem to understand that and appreciate the fact that it's straightforward.
As the president of a university, even one that is careful about the fluff and one that's careful about the over. There's still a lot of bureaucracy involved. So it struck me when you wrote recently, teamwork and thoughtful mission-directed processes should not be confused with bureaucracy. Teamwork is essential, but bureaucracy is crippling. How do you go about, when you think a lot of presidents of universities, they judge their success based on how many more employees do I have, more students do I have, and if I have more employees, it's more people telling me how smart I am. There's a whole lot of very perverse incentives in any organization to kind of bloat bureaucracy. How do you try to promote teamwork over bureaucracy? How do you try to manage that relationship?
So that is a very good question, and it's a significant challenge in any large organization. With nearly 1,000 employees and almost slightly over 9,000 students, a group of 10,000 people, and that doesn't count the alumni and the community that also participate in this thing, and that's a small number compared to some. Mm-hmm. But the processes tend to lead to codification of rules and all that, so people can be treated the same, and that's a noble intent in my mind. That's absolutely clear that it's noble. But the fact of the matter is, sometimes you have to look at somebody in the eye and talk to them about what it is they want and figure that out for them. So my goal, as best I can do it, is to force decision making to occur at the lowest possible level in the organization, and empower people to make decisions. You have to be responsive to rules, and we get edicts of all kinds from all kinds of places, and we have to be responsive to that. But get people, to feel part of the organization by helping people make decisions and work through things at the lowest possible level. I got just yesterday, and I have to get 2 yesterday, of people that wrote me about concerns about things on the campus that were, in a sense, bureaucratic.
Mhm.
And, my attitude is, why not solve those at the lowest? So I immediately pushed them off, sent the person, the email sender. I sent him back a response and said, I'm going to have so-and-so look into this. They'll get back to you within 2 days. And they will. Because I'm empowering them to make a decision about what's right in service to this individual. And that's all easy to say, but Michael, much harder to do, because we want rules. We want to be under the cover of rules and regulations. I'm convinced, and I've said this in one of the many things I've written about bureaucracies. I mean, the quintessential bureaucracy makes sure that nobody can ever be blamed for anything. And that's when a bureaucracy is a well-oiled machine. It's never anybody's fault, unless it's a good thing. And then everybody can make claim to it, but that's a different story. But it's hard.
When you think about, 40% of people will do some sort of higher ed, about 60% don't. Why should the majority of Texans who don't pursue higher ed, their kids aren't pursuing higher ed, their parents are higher ed, why should they care about higher education policy in Texas? Why should real Texans care about it?
That's a good question. And this is something I'm looking at. I'm kind of on my own. I'm a student all the time. And the Texas Triangle, this region between DFW, Houston, and San Antonio, contains about 70% of the population of Texas.
Mm-hmm.
And per capita in that triangle is produced a significant portion of the GDP in the state. I mean, they produce a lot of Texas's GDP, and a lot of that production comes from people who have degrees that have learned various things that help propel a strong economy. It's not the only way, to be sure. Entrepreneurs and risk takers, they also contribute mightily to GDP. What's interesting to this, though, to this point in my mind, I'm looking at what I'm calling right now a working thing, the other triangle in Texas. And that's from Amarillo to San Angelo to El Paso.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the food, fuel, and fiber triangle in the great state of Texas. We have looked at the populations. The population is about 1/7. The land area in the food, fuel, and fiber triangle is almost twice what the other triangle is. And the per capita GDP production in this vast sort of outback of the state of Texas is about the same as it is in the Texas Triangle, which I find to be fascinating.
Yeah.
I don't even know what it means yet. I'm trying to understand it. Mm-hmm. And I don't know what even right I have to do that, other than I have a mind. I ask questions just like everybody, and then I try to ferret them out. And I've got an undergraduate student working with me that's interested in this kind of thing, and we're gathering all kinds of facts and figures about these populations and how they work and their contribution to the future of the state. And what I want to say about that, all of that, is I think Texans should be interested in high quality public higher education because it makes the economy stronger. And I think when it's well executed, it makes a stronger Republican form of government. And thank God we've still got that in my mind. I think that's very important. And I think a college education helps that. Doesn't mean that you can't be an engaged citizen and contribute effectively to a free and open society. But we need some of those people that help think through it, just like the founding fathers, that help think through it for a lot of other people. I just reread Common Sense a couple of times recently, just to see what that was about. And it's intriguing how a mind like Payne's kind of crafts this stuff and puts it out there. And there were people that, never finished 6th grade reading and discussing and interpreting this because it was common sense. I mean, it had a lot of common sense in it. So I do think that the high-quality public education has tremendous value to add to the state. And I'm thankful to be at a place like WT and in a system like the Texas A&M University system that tends to value those, it seems to me to value those things. I was retired before I took this job, and when it all happened, I was intrigued because I knew a little bit about West Texas. I thought I knew a lot. I didn't know sick 'em from come here, as my friend used to say. It is, this is an amazing place.
So I'm going to kind of end on your bio, if you don't mind. So you had a 20-year run at Texas A&M.
I did.
You went from classroom, you were overseeing instruction, then vice chancellor of the system. You headed to Illinois, which sounds like a huge mistake, but anyway, my son-in-law's from Illinois. I love everyone in Illinois. But you retired. You'd kind of done a really great career, and you retired.
Yeah.
And then suddenly in 2016, you're now not retired.
Yeah.
You're now in Canyon, Texas, at West Texas A&M. Can you not stay retired, or are you thinking you're just going to keep going here? What's next for Walter Wendler?
Well, I will guarantee retirement is next. When is the question, but it is next. When I retired from SIU, and this is a true story, I retired on December 31st, 2015.
Mm-hmm.
It ended the year, and that's when my job there ended. December 31st, 2015. On January 6th, 2016, 1 week later, my wife said to me, "Walt, you might want to look for something to do." I lasted a week, Michael. And I played golf twice a day. Which was, for me, was 18 holes because I walked 9 holes at a time when I used to play. I quit, but I gave it up, bad habit. I gave it up. But I played twice a day. I spent 5 hours a day on the golf course. You might want to start looking for something to do. Well, and then this thing came up and I said no twice. I said, Well, and we were moving from Southern Illinois to the Woodlands to get between the two families, one in Collegedale, one in Beaumont. And
you kids?
Yeah, the kids. Yeah, our 2 kids and the grandkids. At that time, were 4, I think. Now there's 6. But I got a call from the search firm that was running this search, and I'd worked with him on a few other presidential searches, and he said, "I was never sure about the other ones, but I think this could be good for you." And I said, "I'm not interested." And the third time he called me, I said, "Well, when are you going to do interviews, airport interviews?" And he told me the day, and I said, "Well, you know what?" I said, "This could be divine providence. I'm driving through Dallas on that day, so I could stop." He said, "You stop, you spend the night, we'll buy you dinner, put you in a nice hotel and all that sort of stuff, and you can just talk to us." Well, I did. And 2 days later, I got a call from the system. They wanted to, Chancellor Sharp wanted to talk to me and so on and so forth. And a week later, I'd lived in the Woodlands for like 2 weeks. And a week later, we sealed the deal. And I finished up 2 months down there. We didn't even unpack the boxes. I had them put them all in the garage. It was amazing. And I don't know exactly, Michael, I don't know how it happened. One foot in front of the other. I wish there was some grand mystery or some divine plan that I could lay out, but not for me. It was putting one foot in front of the other and trying to do and I would say, you started earlier with this, I would say that God put in my path, and I've worked to do those things as best I could. And that was, it's not a very, it's not a very kind of engaging story, but it is the true story. That's what it was. It's simple, almost simple-minded.
As you look at your career, where you are today, what's one piece of advice that you wish someone had given you when young Walter Wendler was starting out in academia that you wish that someone had given you?
You just gave it to me. Don't go to Illinois. It was not a good fit for me. I went to a campus that was, I had over 20 collective bargaining units, and I had to bargain with them. And my parents were both in unions in New York. I thought, well, I can handle that. Not the way they do it in Illinois. It was different. And that was, then I shouldn't say don't go to Illinois. I love Southern Illinois. It was a great place to be. And I still stay in touch with a lot of people up there. But I don't know why I came to Texas. except that it was $212.50 every semester. And I don't know why I ever left. And I shouldn't have, but I did. And it's all great because here I am. We're talking about this. I'm in West Texas. I don't know if I would ever come to West Texas if it wasn't for this. It's all some big plan that I don't fully understand being worked out. And you can tell I'm smiling about it because it's fun.
It's fun. Right?
It's fun. It is fun.
Well, Dr. Wendler, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure, Michael. I enjoyed talking with you very much.